I love knitting. I love the act of taking wool and having it spun and then being able to knit with it to create fabric. Not only can you take and knit fabric with the wool, but you can also weave with it to create beautiful fabrics. And that reminds me of a Japanese folktale called The Spider Weaver. Now, Yosoko was a Japanese farmer who lived up high on the mountain on his farm. And one day he's working in his field and he sees a snake trying to go after a spider. And so he gently goes over with his backhoe that he'd been working with and holds the snake back, giving the spider enough time to run off into the woods. The next day before he heads off to the field, he hears a on his front door. He opens up the door and sees a little girl there, and she's looking up at him. She's like, "Yosoko, I hear that you're looking for a weaver. I'm very good at weaving. If you can provide me food and a place to sleep, I'll work for you." Well, Yosoko was looking for a weaver, so he let the little girl in and showed her into a room that had a long cot, and then in the middle of the room was a beautiful loom that's used to make fabric for weavers. He leaves the little girl there and heads off to the field for the day, and the little girl gets to work. And when he comes home, he finds that his tables are full of beautiful woven fabric from the woolen thread. He's very surprised at how much there is. And he asked her, "How did you make so much in one day?" She looks at him. "You must never ask me that. You must never come into the room while I'm working. You must promise." So Yosako leaves it alone and heads off the next morning to the field like he normally does. When he comes home, he sees another table full of fabric. He is very curious. So he goes around the back of his house, finds the little girl's bedroom window, and peers in. But what he sees is not a little girl weaving, but a spider sitting up on top of a woolen basket, and she's eating the wool. And then she jumps over to the loom and begins to take thread and start weaving with the woolen thread that she has been making. He is very impressed. He also recognizes the spider as the spider he had saved a couple of days before from the snake, and knows that the spider is trying to repay her debtness to him. He's so grateful for her kindness, he never brings it up to her, but instead realizes that her basket of wool is low. And so the next day, instead of going to the fields, he's going to go to the village and get her more wool. And on his walk home, he's thirsty, so he sits down beside the stream with a basket full of wool. And none other than that snake that he had chased away the other day was there and recognized the farmer. So he jumps into the basket and hides himself up underneath the wool. The farmer takes the basket home, hands it to the little girl, and she goes to her room and she closes the door and she transforms herself into a spider. That spider begins to eat the wool just like she's done before, and when she's filled herself up nice and fat with the wool, she jumps onto the loom to begin to spin. And at that moment, the snake comes out of the basket and jumps after her. Now he miscalculates and he falls a little bit, which is just enough time for the spider to A, be in shock, and B, was able to quickly grab her wits and go out the open window. Down, and then she began to run. But she couldn't run fast because she was so full of wool, and that snake was starting to slither down the window and after her. Now, the old man's son, right up above, was looking down and noticed what was happening, and knew that this spider had been shown a lot of kindness to Yosoko the farmer, and wanted to protect it from the snake. And so the old man pulled down his sunbeams down to the spider and began to lift her up into the sky to where she was with him. Oh, she was so thankful. "Thank you so much for saving me. I must repay your kindness." And so she began to spin her webs into the sky and made these beautiful fluffy clouds up in the blue sky next to the old man's son. And that, they say, is the reason why in Japanese the word cloud and spider are the same. Kumo. Isn't that awesome? Hope you've enjoyed our story. Thank you.